وسيئات أعمالنا من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So if you remember last week we were talking about the Sunnah and how the Sunnah was preserved, how it was recorded and guarded and preserved and memorized by the Salaf, in particular during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, during the time of the Sahaba, how they used to memorize those narrations from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They used to learn directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when the revelation was coming down, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was being given the revelation. The companions witnessed that, and they would learn from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam directly. All of the Quran and the Sunnah passed on and conveyed by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the Sahaba, who then also conveyed that and taught it to the Tabi'een, who then passed it on and taught it to their students and their students and their students, until all of that, it was preserved and guarded by the chains of narration. Here then, جهود التابعين في تدوين السنة, the Tabi'een and the efforts that they put in to preserve the Sunnah. أولا الحث على التزام السنة وحفظها وكتابتها والتثبت في روايتها وسماعها. They, the Salaf, gave extreme importance to clinging on to the Sunnah, clinging on to the revelation, just as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded us to do so. عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين. Upon you is to cling to my Sunnah and the Sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs. And also the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that I have left two things behind. As long as you cling on to them, then you will not go astray. The Book of Allah and my Sunnah. So the command to cling to the Sunnah is clear. And the Tabi'een, the Salaf, they similarly worked hard to make sure that the Sunnah was preserved and it was not lost. It's mentioned عن سعيد ابن جبير قال كنت أكتب عند ابن عباس في صحيفتي. He said that I used to write my notes in the class. I used to write my notes in the class of Ibn Abbas until my book it became full. My papers became full from writing those notes, writing what he was writing in the class. حتى أملأها. So I would write in the books my notes until I would fill it all up. But the lesson was still going on. His book was finished. He'd copied all of the notes into it, or he had written all of the notes into it during the class from what the Shaykh was saying. But the Shaykh, in this case Ibn Abbas, was still teaching and the class was still going on, but his notepad was finished now. Sa'id ibn Jubair, his notepad was finished, no paper left to write. So then he said, ثم أكتب في ظهرنا علي ثم أكتب في كفي. He said that when the notepad ran out, he would write on the tops of his shoes, And then he would even write on his hands. He would carry on making the notes on his hand and then go home and copy it up into his book to make sure that he wouldn't miss out on any hadith. He wouldn't miss out on any part of the sunnah. That's how much importance they gave. In another narration, روى الخطيب من عدة طرق عن معاوية ابن قرة قال كنا لا نعد علم من لم يكتب علمه علما. That we never used to consider the knowledge of a person to be knowledge if he did not write. If he did not write and he did not make his notes, then we would not consider his knowledge to be considered as knowledge. He doesn't write anything down, he doesn't make notes of anything, then we don't give any importance to his claim to knowledge. Similarly, it's mentioned that they wrote books at that early time. They weren't books like we have books here now, but they were parchments and papers and scrolls that they wrote down their notes in, they wrote down their hadith in. They were around from those early times, from the time of the Salaf. عن ابن شهاب الزهري قال أمرنا عمر بن عبد العزيز بجمع السنن فكتبناها دفترا دفترا فبعث إلى كل أرض له عليها سلطان دفترا. He says that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz commanded us to write down all of the Sunnah. So we began writing it down, one notepad after another notepad, filling them all up, writing the Sunnah in them, writing the Hadith in them. And then he sent these copies of these notebooks with the Hadith written in them to all of the different lands that he had authority over, so that the Sunnah would be widespread in all of the different lands. The Sunnah would be known and taught in all of the different places. وروى الدارمي بسنده أن عمر بن عبد العزيز كتب إلى أهل المدينة انظروا حديث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فاكتبوه فإني خفت دروس العلم وذهاب أهله. He said to them, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, to the people of Medina, he said to them, look at the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam and write it. Look at the hadith of the Messenger that you have, all of the hadith, and write them down, because I fear that otherwise it will disappear, that knowledge will go and the people of knowledge will go, that it will all end up disappearing and be lost otherwise. So write it down, write down that sunnah, write down those ahadith. And so that's what they began doing in those early times, from the time of the Salaf. They began writing down the narrations, the ahadith. They began recording it all in the various parchments and scrolls. Then after that, أما الجيل الثاني فهم أتباع التابعين. Then they are the ones who come after the tabi'een, the third generation. Then they similarly would strive to ensure that the sunnah was preserved. They similarly began looking into these books that were written, and they began organizing them. So you can see historically how it all happened. During the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would write things down. When the Prophet was alive, during his time, they would write things down. And it might be a small piece of paper, it might be a small leaf, it might be a small scroll, small bits and bobs. They would write things down on them. Maybe some sections of the Quran, some ayat that they knew, they would write down on some piece of paper, parchment that they had. maybe a hadith that they knew, they would write it down. Maybe some tafsir of the Quran they had heard from the Prophet ﷺ, they would write it down. So the Sahaba, they had all of these pieces of paper or parchments and scrolls and the barks from the palm trees, all of these different things that they would write down their notes on. And they were widespread amongst them all. Sahaba, they all had these small bits and bobs of writings of Quran, of Hadith. Then at the time of the Tabi'een, it became more serious in writing down bigger sections, lots of Hadith, putting them together, writing them down. Then in the time of the third generation, they began to organize all of these writings. They found all of these parchments and all of these scrolls and all of these writings from the Tabi'een, the students of the Sahaba and the Sahaba themselves, radiyallahu anhum, and they began to organize all of those parchments and scrolls into more, what resembles more like the books we have now. They began to organize them into what resembles the types of books that we have now. One of the great Imams around about that time or just after that time who did exactly that, he got together all of these different narrations and hadith and compiled them into a book. One of the famous ones of that time in those early generations is of course Al-Imam Al-Bukhari. Al-Imam Al-Bukhari, he was born in the year 194 Hijri. Born in the year 194 Hijri. And he died in the year 256 Hijri. Born in the year 194 and died in the year 256. Abu Abdullah. Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ismail. That's the name of Al-Imam Al-Bukhari. Muhammad, the son of Ismail. Muhammad, the son of Ismail, the son of Ibrahim. That was the grandfather of Al-Imam Al-Bukhari, the son of Al-Mughirah. That is the name of Al-Imam Al-Bukhari. Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Ibrahim ibn Al-Mughirah Al-Bukhari. Born in 194 and died in 256. We know, of course, Al-Imam Al-Bukhari because of his most famous book, Sahih Al-Bukhari, where he compiled and put together Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is the book which is commonly known amongst the people as Sahih Al-Bukhari. That is the common name known to everybody, Sahih Al-Bukhari. But it's mentioned, قال الإمام النووي سماه الجامع المسند الصحيح المختصر من أمور رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وسننه وأيامه. Al-Imam Al-Nawawi mentioned that actually Al-Imam Al-Bukhari had named it, that name that we just read out, that it is the comprehensive Musnad, the authentic, summarized from the affairs of the Prophet ﷺ and his Sunnah and his days. That was the full title that Al-Imam Al-Nawawi mentioned, that Al-Imam Al-Bukhari had actually named it. Ibn Hajar mentioned, قال ابن حجر سماه الجامع الصحيح المسند من حديث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وسننه وأيامه. Again, that full title that Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar mentioned, Al-Imam Al-Bukhari actually named it. But it is commonly and popularly known as Sahih Al-Bukhari. Why did Al-Imam Al-Bukhari write that book, Sahih Al-Bukhari? Why did he even write that book, and what was the reasoning? What was the cause behind him thinking to write this book, putting together all of these hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? There are different reasons the scholars have mentioned. There are some different reasons the scholars they mention. One of them is قال الحافظ ابن حجر لما رأى البخاري تلك التصانيف التي ألفت قبل عصره وجدها بحسب الوضع جامعة بين ما يدخل تحت التصحيح والتحسين والكثير منها يشمله التضعيف فلا يقال لغثه سمين فحرك همته لجمع الحديث الصحيح الذي لا يرتاب فيه أمين. One of the reasons Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar mentions is that Al-Imam Al-Bukhari, he looked at all of these writings that had been done during the times of the Salaf, and there were compilations of various things, and others had written these compilations, these books, but many of them, they had many hadith in them, Sahih hadith, but also sometimes in amongst them weak hadith. So he decided he was going to put his effort in to putting together a book which was purely just Sahih hadith. Not the books that existed at the time, some of the others which had Sahih hadith, but also had some weak narrations in there too. So he wanted to put one together which was purely Sahih hadith. Another reason, it's mentioned وَقَوَّى عَزْمَهُ مَا سَمِعَهُ مِنْ أُسْتَاذِهِ أمير المؤمنين في الحديث والفقه إسحاق ibn Rahoya. That on one occasion Al-Imam Al-Bukhari heard from his Shaykh Ishaq ibn Rahoya saying لو جمعتم كتابا لصحيح سنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال البخاري فوقع ذلك في قلبي فأخذت في جمع الجامع الصحيح. That the Shaykh of Al-Imam Al-Bukhari, Ishaq ibn Rahoya, on one occasion he was saying to his students, if only one of you would put together all of the authentic sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Al-Imam Al-Bukhari says that when I heard that from my Shaykh, that he decided to raise his effort level and to go and do that and put together all of the authentic sunnah just like his Shaykh had suggested. Another possible reason, قال الحافظ أيضا وروينا بالإسناد الثابت عن محمد بن سليمان بن فارس قال سمعت أبا عبد الله البخاري يقول رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وكأني بين يديه وبيدي مروحة أذب عنه فسألت بعض المعبرين فقال لي أنت تذب عنه الكذب فهو الذي حملني على إخراج الجامع. Another possible reason, it's mentioned that Al-Imam Al-Bukhari himself said that I had a dream that I was with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That Al-Imam Al-Bukhari had a dream he was with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that he was holding a fanning in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with a fan next to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, blowing that wind upon him. So then he asked, Al-Imam Al-Bukhari asked some people what this dream could mean. And they told him it means that you are defending the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's what led him to go and do exactly that, to defend the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by putting together a book with all of the authentic narrations in it. So there are some of the reasons that are mentioned as to why Al-Imam Al-Bukhari wrote this book or put together this book, Sahih Al-Bukhari. Of course, we know that Al-Imam Al-Bukhari tried his best to make sure every single narration in the book was authentic. قال الحافظ تقرر أنه التزم الصحة It is known that Al-Imam Al-Bukhari ensured that everything he used in that book was an authentic narration. وأنه لا يريد فيه إلا حديثا صحيحا, and that he wouldn't put into it except the authentic narrations. هذا أصل موضوعه. This is the basis of him writing that book. Authentic narrations only. وهو مستفاد من تسميته إياه الجامع الصحيح. And also the fact that Imam Al-Bukhari named it as the authentic collection indicates that it was the authentic hadith only. And similarly, there are other scholars who have mentioned exactly that point, that he only ever put in the authentic narrations. They also mention about Al-Imam Al-Bukhari that every time he decided on a hadith to put into his Sahih Al-Bukhari, that every time he decided on a hadith to put in, before putting it in, he would pray 2 raka'at. He would pray 2 raka'at first and then put that hadith into the Sahih. So that was to indicate as well the amount of effort he put in to make sure that all of the narrations were absolutely authentic, that all of the narrations were exactly correct. He would pray every time before putting any of those narrations into Al-Bukhari, Sahih Al-Bukhari. How many hadith are there in Sahih Al-Bukhari? There are, of course, some narrations which are mukarrar, they are repeated, but with the mukarrar, with all of the repetition, it is 7,275. That is what is mentioned. قال الحافظ أبو عمرو عثمان بن الصلاح وجملة ما في صحيح البخاري رحمك الله 7,275. That there are 7,275 hadith with the repeated ones, because sometimes some of them are repeated throughout the book, different sections of them. وقد قيل إنها بإسقاط المكررة 4,000. And some of the scholars, they said, if you remove the repeated ones, then there are 4,000 independent narrations in Al-Bukhari. إلا أن هذه العبارة قد يندرج تحتها عندهم آثار الصحابة والتابعين، وربما عد الحديث الواحد المروي بالإسنادين حديثين. But even that could have repetition in it, because sometimes if a hadith has 2 different chains of narration, then do you count it as 1 or you count it as 2? قال الحافظ أبو الفضل شهاب الدين بن حجر فجميع ما في صحيح البخاري من المتون الموصولة بلا تكرير على التحرير 1000 حديث و600 حديث وحديثان. Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, he says, when you narrow it right down, then it comes to 2,602 independent narrations without any repetitions. So that is regarding Sahih Al-Bukhari. Then we also have another great Imam of that time, close to that time, and that is Al-Imam Muslim. Al-Imam Muslim, Abu al-Husayn Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj ibn Muslim al-Qushayri al-Naysaburi. Al-Imam Muslim Abu al-Husayn Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj ibn Muslim al-Qushayri al-Naysaburi. He was born in the year 204 Hijri. Born in the year 204 Hijri. And died in the year 261 Hijri. Born in 204 and died in 261. The year he was born, Al-Imam Muslim, was the year Al-Imam Shafi'i died. Al-Imam Shafi'i died in 204, and Al-Imam Muslim was born in that year. And he then died 5 years after Al-Imam Al-Bukhari in 261. His book, known as Al-Musnad As-Sahih, but of course recognized famously amongst the people as Sahih Muslim. قال ابن الصلاح, Ibn Salah, he mentioned that Makki ibn Abdan قال سمعت مسلم ابن الحجاج يقول لو أن أهل الحديث يكتبون 200 سنة. No, before this in fact, روينا عن مسلم رضي الله عنه قال صنفت هذا المسند الصحيح من 300,000 حديث مسموعة. He said, Al-Imam Muslim said that I have wrote this Sahih Muslim from 300,000 hadith. He selected the ones he put into Sahih Muslim from 300,000 hadith that he knew, that he had. 300,000 hadith. Then the next statement from Makki ibn Abdan, قال سمعت مسلم ابن الحجاج يقول لو أن أهل الحديث يكتبون 200 سنة الحديث فمدارهم على هذا المسند. That if the people of hadith, they were writing hadith for 200 years, then it would all revolve around what is in Sahih Muslim. That the core of the narrations are all there in Sahih Muslim. Why did Al-Imam Muslim write Sahih Muslim? What was his reason for doing it and writing it? تولى الإمام مسلم بيان أسباب تأليفه لهذا المسند الصحيح في مقدمته حيث ذكر أن السبب الباعث له على ذلك أمران. Al-Imam Muslim said there are two reasons why he wrote Sahih Muslim. One of them إجابة لسؤال أحد تلاميذه حيث قال في مقدمته ثم إن شاء الله مبتدئون في تخريج ما سألت تأليفه على شريطتي سوف أذكرها لك. He says that one of the reasons is it was a request from one of his students. It was a request from one of his students, and therefore he acknowledged that and began writing and compiling Sahih Muslim upon the conditions that he put down. Secondly, كثرة ما ألف وقذف به إلى الناس من الكتب المملوءة بالضعاف والمناكير والواهيات. A similar reason to Al-Imam Al-Bukhari, because there were so many other books at the time that were filled with weak narrations, that Al-Imam Muslim wanted to write one which was exclusively for the authentic narrations. There is a slight difference between Al-Imam Al-Bukhari and Al-Imam Muslim in their books. We know that the book of Al-Imam Al-Bukhari is overall stronger than the book of Al-Imam Muslim. But why?
Is it because his conditions were stricter?
Why the what? Why is the book of Al-Imam Al-Bukhari considered higher than the book of Al-Imam Muslim?
Is it because the authenticity of the thing and the other reasons as well, for example, like he had a dream and all this kind of stuff, maybe?
Why is Al-Imam Al-Bukhari considered higher than Al-Imam Muslim in his compilation of the hadith?
We have the hadith from the person in the chain.
So I remember they said he heard it directly from the people, or if they heard it from somebody will hear as well. So basically, it's like somebody he heard it directly, or somebody will tell him the truth. Yes, one. It's again, but,
The hearing thing is correct. What it is, so a Sahih Hadith, an authentic Hadith, there are conditions. How do you work out if a Hadith is authentic or not? There are conditions. Obviously, one of the conditions is that all of the chain of narration has to be connected. So, for example, if I hear a story now, I hear it from this brother, who heard it from that brother, who heard it from that brother, who heard it from that brother. Each one narrated it to the next, direct chain of narration, and he's the one who actually saw the event happen. So he's narrated it directly, and everybody's heard it. It's all connected. But what if I heard from this brother, who heard from that brother, who heard from that brother directly, missing him out? Now all of a sudden there's a break in the chain of narration. That makes it a weak hadith then, typically. Al-Imam Al-Bukhari used to say that he needs proof that every narrator definitely heard it from the other narrator. Needs proof that every narrator definitely heard it from the other narrator. It's not enough to just say that these two narrators both lived at the same time and they are both trustworthy. So if one of them says he heard from the other one, then we've got no reason to doubt them. True or false? You have a person who is trustworthy 100%. Another person who is trustworthy 100%. They are both alive at the same time. One of them says, I heard from him. Is that okay or not?
Yeah.
Is that okay or not?
Yeah.
It's okay, but it's not the condition of Al-Imam Al-Bukhari. It's okay. A trustworthy narrator says, I heard from another narrator, trustworthy as well, they both lived at the same time, mu'asara. That's okay. Al-Imam Muslim accepts that. Al-Imam Al-Bukhari doesn't. He doesn't just accept that. He needs to know and have proof that the two of them actually met. So imagine now you have a trustworthy narrator, another trustworthy narrator, both lived at the same time. One of them says, an the other one, that I heard from the other one, I got narrated from the other one. But that isn't enough for Imam Al-Bukhari. He wants proof that they actually met. That they met and one of them heard from the other one. So he makes it even more strict. That's why his book is considered higher level than the book of Al-Imam Muslim. Al-Imam Muslim doesn't go that strict, that I need proof that they met and they heard from each other. Al-Imam Muslim says enough that they are trustworthy and they are narrating from each other, enough. Al-Imam Bukhari says no, I need proof that they met each other and the mulaqat occurred, not just the mu'asara. So there's a higher level of strength in the narrations that Al-Imam Al-Bukhari allows, whereas Al-Imam Muslim, even though it's still perfectly good, is slightly lower then, because he doesn't have that level of stringent, the strength in that selection of narrations. Also, with regards to Sahih Muslim, it's mentioned, Al-Imam Al-Nawawi said, إِنَّ عِدَّةَ أَحَادِيثِهِ نَحْوُ 4,000 بِإِسْقَاطِ الْمُكَرَّرِ. Without the repeated ones, it is approximately 4,000 narrations. And with the repeated ones, it is approximately 12,000 narrations. 12,000 with the repeats and approximately 4,000 without the repeats. So that is two of the famous books that were written, Sahih Al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. The narrations within them are all authentic. There is some discussion over a couple here or there. Some discussions occur about some. But overall, of course, all of the narrations are authentic. And Al-Imam Al-Bukhari, like it's mentioned, used to pray 2 raka'at istikhara before every hadith that he put into that book as well. So these are the two most famous books, and when you say muttafaqun alayhi, then you are referring to Sahih Al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. They are the two, and that is the highest level of a hadith. If the hadith is muttafaqun alayhi, that is the strongest level of a hadith. Then after that, the ones which are in Bukhari. Then after that, the ones which are in Muslim. And then you have all of the other books as well. The Kutub al-Sunan, Sunan ibn Majah, Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i, Abu Dawood. But their books are not the same as Al-Bukhari and Muslim. They didn't write their books just for the sake of the authentic narrations. They put some other narrations in there too, because their purpose was the understanding of fiqh, the different chapters of fiqh, and all of the evidences that are used in those chapters. Even if some people use weak evidences, they put them there just to show you, look, this is the hadith that they use. So it was a compilation of all of the different narrations, even if some of them were weak. So their purpose wasn't the same purpose as Al-Bukhari and Muslim. So, for the authentic narrations, of course, muttafaqun alayhi, Al-Bukhari and Muslim. Any questions on that? Or anything else related to that?
You know what you said, the Bukhari, when he was born, you said he was born in...
194.
Now, what's the difference between Imam Muslim and Bukhari? Because he said 261 Hijri, and then said 224 Hijri and died 261. Well, you said Al-Bukhari was...
194256.
So 1000?
194256.
19?
4.
Okay.
He was born, Al-Imam Al-Bukhari was born in 194 Hijri.
Okay.
And died in 256.
No. Yes.
And Al-Imam Muslim was born in 204 and died in 261. That's the difference. How old was Al-Imam Al-Bukhari when he died then?
63.
Approximately 62, 63. And Al-Imam Muslim?
He was...
Approximately
57.
56, 57. Young. Al-Imam Muslim, Al-Imam Al-Bukhari, 50s, 60s, not 70, 80, 90. 50s, 60s. And look at the work that they did.
Ask what you know, you have like a masjid where they invite, for example, scholars, whatever. And you know the masjid, for example, they invite different people as well, for example. So when they invite this scholar here, some people say we will go to the mosque and take from the scholars. Is that allowed?
So if you have a mosque that invites scholars, for example, but they also invite other people who are not good. It's all mixed up. They bring some people who are good, some people who are not good. Then the scholars, they say you shouldn't attend those events because you are going to increase their numbers and cause confusion to the youth. The youth come along now, they see everybody there's, mashallah, this is good, then everybody's here. And then the next week or the next month, they bring somebody who's not good. And then all of the youth are going to do what? They're going to go attend that too. So it's a problem. Takfir al-sawad, as the scholars say, do not go and increase their numbers and allow them to cause confusion for the people. So if they bring somebody good, if they bring a scholar, that's a different issue. But you don't go to increase their numbers. And people, they say, but they brought the scholars and we need to go listen to the scholars. MashaAllah, all of a sudden now people have this zeal that they need to go and attend the mosque. So often the scholars and their books and their writings and their audios and everything is happening, but you have to go to the mosque of the people who bring the people of innovation and other types. You have to go cooperate with them. Do not increase their numbers. Do not increase the numbers of the people who are bringing these wrong types of speakers too. This is not something light, it's the religion. They cooperate with people who have been refuted by the scholars. They cooperate with like Luton and Brixton and these people who the scholars have refuted for years. Not me or anybody else, not spubs in Birmingham, nothing. Scholars have done this. Scholars have spoken about these people from years ago. Nothing to do with any of us in the UK. This is from the scholars who spoke about certain individuals, who spoke about, for example, Ali Hassan al-Halabi. Is that I or anybody in Birmingham or anybody spubs who refuted them? Nothing. In fact, we used to invite him. Ali Hassan al-Halabi, we used to invite him. But then who refuted him? Not us. Not us, not Birmingham, not anybody. The scholars refuted him. The scholars, elderly, old, major, senior scholars, Not us, not anybody in the UK. If anybody in the UK tries to refute them, what will they do? They'll go back and tell the scholars refute us. How are we going to refute them? This is such a lie that people spread everywhere. That we refuted them and spubs refute. How are we going to refute them? We refute them, they'll go back and tell the major scholars, look what they're doing in the UK to us, and then the major scholars will refute us. It was the major scholars themselves who refuted these people. They refuted them. We translated those refutations, translated what the scholars have said, what the scholars have said about these people like Ali Hassan al-Halabi. But now what happens? Those people carry on inviting them. They say, we're not going to take what the scholars said. Scholars refuted him and they don't accept it. They don't accept it. They carry on inviting him. Just now they invited him in Luton. And these people, other people, they invite those people, they cooperate with them. Why don't they take from the scholars now? It's not me, it's not anybody else refuting these people, these individuals. It's the scholars refuting them. And yet these people in Luton everywhere are still inviting them. That's not my fault. That's not anybody else's in the UK's fault. The scholars refuted them for their errors and their mistakes. So now if you're going to carry on cooperating with them and you're going to reject the statements of the scholars refuting them, then what do you expect from the rest of us? We're going to cooperate and carry on working with you. You're rejecting what the scholars are saying. You don't accept the refutations upon these people. And then these lies that no, it's the people in the UK. They've done it. The statements are from the scholars, not from us. Go back and read them. In the Arabic language, all of them from the scholars. Translated into English from the scholars. Anything else you see additional from anybody in the UK is only additional extra clarification or explanation or whatever. But the refutations from their origin, they are from the scholars, and everybody knows this. And it's a lie that they propagate. We are the ones refuting the scholars. How are we going to refute the scholars? This is the scholars who speak about them, and they've mentioned he has a mistake, he has a mistake. So don't follow these people and don't follow these mistakes. Yeah, somebody has to have no intelligence to think that we in the UK can refute these people and refute the scholars and get away with it. How are we going to refute the scholars? It is the scholars themselves who have warned against these people. Don't listen to this one, don't listen to that one. They are not teaching you right, they're not teaching you right. The scholars have done it. We simply translated those statements to allow the English-speaking audience to be aware and to know who to take knowledge from and who not to take knowledge from. It's as simple as that. We're out of time again. We're going to have to conclude because I have to get to another one. But inshallah ta'ala, next week I think we're starting the new course. Next week is going to be the new course, brand new, we're going to start, which is the book about the 3 fundamental principles. That is about the 3 questions all of us are going to get asked when you die. When you die in the grave, the angels come and they ask you 3 questions. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? And who is your prophet? We're going to spend about 15 lessons. About 15, maybe 18 lessons. About 5 or 6 lessons for each topic. Who is your Lord? Properly, 5 or 6 weeks we'll discuss it all. Then the next question, what is your religion? 5 or 6 weeks we'll discuss it all. Then who is your Prophet Muhammad? 5 or 6 weeks we'll discuss it all. These are the 3 important questions all of us are going to be asked in the grave. So the new course starting next week is about those 3 questions.
The Masjid has a workbook as well.
There's a workbook which has been made as well. Brothers have put together the workbook. So you'll have that available. You can get the workbook. You can follow along with that in the class. Make your notes on it. Make it easy to learn it, to remember it, to add on your notes to it. So that workbook will be available as well. So inshallah ta'ala, make your arrangements, get those workbooks and everything next week. After Asr prayer, we'll begin with that new course inshallah ta'ala.